Let's bring this conversation back to studio now and welcome Dr. Levy Ndou, who's a political analyst. Doctor, always a great pleasure having you with us. So let's start here before we talk about what the representatives or the representative of the MK party, Mr. Ndou, has just told my colleague there. But we saw the numbers coming in this morning. There was a lot of speculation as to how the MK is going to impact and shape the political landscape. A lot of people were saying, it's just going to be, just empty noise, white noise. Your reaction to how they've actually performed as we continue counting?
I am one of those who had a very strong feeling that the MK party would make a very huge impact in these elections. And I'm aware that most parties that would come in just towards the elections, they actually perform very well during the elections. And the MK party has actually proven that to all of us, that they came in, even though they were being led by interim structures, they came in and they made a very big showing in these elections. And of course, whether we like it or not, and most people would say that it's still early to come with a final results, the issue at hand is that the MK party is counted now amongst the major political parties in South Africa when you look at the national ballot. And they've made a huge impact in KwaZulu-Natal, in Gauteng. They are coming. They are also making a huge impact in Mpumalanga. Mm-hmm. So those who have decided to ignore the MK party are now convinced that indeed in South Africa there is MK party which is making a huge impact in the body politic of South Africa.
What do you say to those narratives that were saying this is just a populist type of movement and they are following President Jacob Zuma, who's somehow got a grudge against his former political home, the ANC?
Populist approach also work in politics. And if you become aware that there are people who would not care about ideology, there are people who will not care about your history, but as long as you are popular and you speak their language, those people will actually follow you. And I think it could be something that might have been advised to former President Zuma, or something that he has been aware of, that if he can make a move of forming a political party, it can actually be successful. Mm-hmm. And of course it has happened that way. So populism in politics, it's a very, very big factor. And there are a lot of other leaders who actually became public representatives.
It's kind of like a strategy now.
Yes, indeed, because they are very much popular. And that's why there are many instances where you'd hear people saying that this person is even more popular than a political party. So it plays a very, very significant role. Mm-hmm. And that is why we have such, not only in South Africa and elsewhere.
What do you make of the comments by the ANC national chairperson about, tribalism in relation to if the MK actually takes the KwaZulu-Natal province?
Well, these are issues that when you deal with, you need to be extremely sensitive.
Absolutely.
Because South Africa has a history of divisions. So unless you have got credible information that will talk to such, you should be able to indicate that. But stakes are very high, and I think at some point it will be important for certain statements not to be made only for the purposes of the cohesion of South Africans. But if indeed you have political parties that are formed on the basis of tribal lines and parties that are formed on the basis of racial lines, they actually take us back. We're actually not going anywhere. But any form of tribalism and racism, in my view, has to be defeated, and it should never be encouraged, because instead of taking us forward,
you're taking us backwards.
Back, yeah.
You know, we actually heard the similar sentiments, Doctor. I think I heard Helen Ziller in relation to the PA in the Western Cape saying, though it seems like people are voting along ethnic lines. And I just feel like this was not adequately interrogated. Thabo Mbeki, the former president, when he casted his special vote the other day, when he was interviewed by the media after casting his vote, they were asking him what his wishes were for the upcoming elections, and he emphatically said that he hopes that the people in KZN do not start violence. So that sensitivity that we are talking about, particularly coming from a party that is always preaching unity, what does that speak to?
You will recall that few months back there were utterances that would talk about it's this individual or we're going to disrupt elections.
Yes.
It is these elections, if it does not move in our favor, we are going to ensure that there is peace or there is instability. There are also words that were saying that what you observed in July of the other year was too little. If
and some of those were not proven, Doctor. Some of them were just hearsay. Let's put that out there.
Indeed. And those, in my view, are statements that should not have been made. But equally, you don't need to respond to such in a manner that does not prevent the existence of violence. You need to respond in a manner that would bring harmony and ensure that such is not encouraged. And my sense also is that it is not everything that is worth responding to. And you would expect that in some instances, leaders should rise beyond what is happening and become the source of solution rather than being an active player in issues that could promote violence and instability in the country.
Talking about that, let's move on now, Doctor. We've just heard the MK national spokesperson there, and he says, judging by the results, they are certainly hoping to be the kingmakers. Those were his exact words here, particularly in Gauteng. And of course, KZN is a different story because vote counting is still going on. And as you earlier alluded to, Mpumalanga. So, and he also made reference to the fact that they still don't have an active or installed leadership structure, particularly at this stage. As we understand it, they're still going to an elective conference. And we've heard, utterances from the MK party leader himself saying that they're not there for positions. So how, a lot of people are asking then, how do you then vote in an organization that does not have an adequate leadership structure in place? How does that affect the voters? But voters are seemingly going out to vote for them.
Maybe what we need to start off by saying is that the MK party, even though there has been an emphasis that they are gunning for 2/3 majority, they have actually performed well. In my view, if the purpose of the MK party is to frustrate the ANC or to remove the ANC from being a dominant player in South African politics, that has been achieved. And in my view, the party that has to celebrate the most in these elections, based on what we have, should be the MK party. because they just came in now. They are guaranteed seats in the National Assembly. They can run the province of KwaZulu-Natal. They are a factor in Mpumalanga. They are a factor in Gauteng. So this is the party that has to celebrate. And the structural aspects are issues that the leadership of the party has to deal with. Firstly, we would be unfair to have expected the MK party to focus on having structures
And
campaign whilst they're focusing on the elections. I think what they decided to do was to say, let's put aside the issues of the structures. Let's ensure that we consolidate our support, which in my view has been the best strategy. Let's make sure that people come and vote for the party, and people responded by voting for the party. The next step now will be to send people in parliament and therefore build structures of the party, whether in Mpumalanga or actually where they've got seats, then it will start building such structures.
Doctor, let's move on to the Patriotic Alliance. You've just mentioned MK needs to be the party that actually is celebrating throughout these elections. But what about the Patriotic Alliance?
The Patriotic Alliance is, there are most people who think that the Patriotic Alliance is a new party. It is not. The Patriotic Alliance went through a building phase. And what they did is that they started by building structures, and then they started to participate in the elections. And what they did in these elections is that, specifically when we look at the by-elections, they started taking wards from the Democratic Alliance in the Western Cape. They took some of the wards from the ANC. But what they did is that in instances where they were in a coalition, they actually made sure that they become a dominant player in those coalitions. And that actually worked for them, because you would constantly hear the voice of the Patriotic Alliance. But at the same time, in an area where the leader, Mr. Mackenzie, was a mayor in a municipality, he made a lot of impact in that municipality, to an extent that you would not easily ignore the work that the PA was doing, and also ignore the Patriotic Alliance as a party. And that is what made them to be in a map. But also at the same time, the other leaders of the Patriotic Alliance, especially in Gauteng, were also making huge impact in government, which created a situation where the Patriotic Alliance became a role player in South African politics. Somebody was asking me a question to say, would people be resonating with the message of the Patriotic Alliance? Because the other day, I saw a bus written words, Abahambe.
Their slogan,
yes,
in relation to illegal immigrants
and
in
indeed,
the country.
In most instances where the Patriotic Alliance would be making public statements that put an emphasis on the laws that must be created on illegal immigrants, and their position is well known. And that takes us to the next step. The performance, the stance of the Patriotic Alliance in terms of illegal immigration is known. And the stance of the EFF in terms of migration is also known. And you would know the stand of these two political parties. And the performance of both could also be attributed to such.
Now, let's talk about the other parties that were touted to be one of the biggest political game changers, particularly in this election. Also newcomers, Doctor. I'm talking about your Bosa as well as your Rise Mzansi. What do you think went wrong? Where do you think things went wrong?
You would agree with me that Rise Mzansi started to be a political party for some time. And their intentions were very clear. And even before the announcement of the election dates, we had already started seeing the posters of Rise Mzansi in the polls. And that was a clear statement of intent on the part of Rise Mzansi to say they are going to campaign in these elections. And like the MK party, Rise Mzansi decided to have its own target group. And my sense is that they did not have defined branches that they will actually rely on. But what they did, in my view, was that their presence was felt throughout the country because they were able to use the recent ways of communication, and they were known everywhere. And you would see young people appearing to be following this party. And remember, they are the ones who are saying that they are going to ensure that they make a huge impact in these elections. But it's important to note that we're still at about 40 of the wards that have been counted.
Yep.
Maybe they will still have to come, but they appear not to be performing
the way
as
that
we expected. Equally with Bosa, I think they did not do enough work that required them to get the number of votes that they should that they got, because Mmusi Maimane, coming from leading the Democratic Alliance, the assumption that most people would have would be that he could have moved with a certain portion of the constituency from the DA. He should have also been able to attract other people towards the party. And unfortunately, this is one party, in my view, that is also not performing as expected. But
so
I
they
think
failed in delivering their message across or articulating their message. Is
I think
your observation?
they did not do well in articulating their message, or maybe people did not
just resonate with what they were saying,
with
the
what they were saying,
ideals as
yes.
well.
But also at the same time, there is still sufficient time for them to go back, reflect, regroup,
They're a young
develop
party.
strategy. They're a young party, so they tried. They now have the experience.
They've got the financial muscle.
They got the financial muscle, so they should therefore be able to come with the best strategy that will make them have an impact come the next elections, but not in this ones, unfortunately.
All right. Prof, let's talk about discussions that we are likely to hear starting from tomorrow. Heads are being put together in terms of working out who's going to bid with who. What are some of your predictions? We've heard some of the parties come out publicly and saying, oh, well, we're part of this pact and whatnot. But now numbers are definitely changing, and we could definitely see some upsets as well as backtracking on some of those promises and allegiances.
Yeah, there is nothing wrong in having discussions around the parties that you love to work with, even before results are announced. So you can still do that, but
you put yourself in a precarious position, though, because
unfortunately, because maybe some of the traditional voters of the IFP,
I was about to go there, but go ahead, Doctor.
Could have been worried about their participation in this kind of discussions. Now, I think it's important also to note that some political parties would enter into this kind of arrangements even prior elections, not having done sufficient consultation with their constituencies. And political leaders will do all this, assuming that because they are leaders, that will be acceptable to their constituencies. And that is one mistake that they actually make. Now, it is still difficult now to know which parties could be able to work together. What politicians could be doing now, as we speak, they could be trying, they could have shifted from the election mood, and they are now in this reality of what is behind us. And now they need to start to calm their minds, change the tone of how they were relating with each other before these elections.
Eat humble pie.
Eat humble pies and ensure that whatever happens, they should become beneficiaries. So there are politicians who are not sleeping, whether they are sent by their parties or not, but based on this, political leaders could be having some kinds of discussions in order to map their way forward. But you know, there are parties that have made pronouncements in the past to say we cannot work with party A, we cannot work with party A, but when we wake up the following morning,
oh yeah, we are susceptible to talks with party B.
That is what happens in the setup that we have in South Africa. So anything is possible, and the unfortunate part which we have learned in the previous elections is that when they have this kind of discussions, it is done behind closed doors. So they'll just open the door and then they make an announcement. So all we have to do now is to just wait and see.
Wait and see, we shall, Doctor. Right now, these are the live results for the 2024 poll. We're currently sitting on 48.86 completed. That is 11,380 of 23,293 voting districts that have been completed. And of course, the ANC, as you can see there, on 42.1%. And of course, the DA are on 23.39% and MK sitting on 10.23%. And Dr. Levy Ndou there saying that the MK is the party that has to be celebrating during these elections.